Welcome to KOT Aero, knowledge on tap for the aerospace community. Subscribe for free at kotaero.com. All right, let's dive into it.
All right, strap in, everybody. We're going deep on Northrop Grumman this time.
Oh yeah, their Q3 2024 performance.
We've got their investor website and even their 10Q filing.
Way more interesting than you'd think.
Not just the usual dry numbers. There's some really cool stuff buried in there.
Yeah, you can get a real feel for their strategy.
And the challenges a company like this has to deal with.
Absolutely, being right on the cutting edge.
So, big picture first.
Yeah.
Everybody knows Northrop Grumman, right?
One of the giants, for sure.
Huge in defense. Everything from aircraft like the F-35,
The space systems.
missile defense. They work with the U.S. government, of course.
International customers, too.
What I find fascinating is how well their work lines up with what's going on in the world right now.
Totally, all the biggest national security issues. Look at Ukraine.
The Middle East is always tense.
And more focus on space as, well, a military domain.
It's like Northrop Grumman's right in the middle of all that.
They are, yeah. Makes you think of those high-stakes chess games, but global scale.
Except the pieces are like fighter jets and satellites.
Exactly. And these financial statements, think of those as the scorecard.
Okay, I like that. So what's the score saying? Q3 2024 sales up 2%.
To almost $10 billion compared to the same period last year.
Solid growth. But here's the really eye-catching part. Diluted earnings per share, they would jump 13%.
Up to $7 a share.
Investors love that kind of thing. What does it tell us?
Well, it's not just revenue going up, they're getting more profitable too.
The beats.
Managing their costs well, delivering good value to those shareholders.
All right, get ready for this. They've got a record backlog, $85 billion.
$85 billion, wow, that's not just good, it's a statement.
What's that kind of backlog saying about the future?
Well, it's their customers saying they believe in them, the U.S. government especially.
Locked in on big projects for years to come.
Exactly, $85 billion in future revenue. Already there, provides a ton of stability.
Even if the world goes crazy, economically speaking?
Helps a lot. And on top of that, their operating margin went up too, to 11.5%.
Operating margin. Refresh my memory on what that means.
Sure. It's basically how much profit they're making on each dollar of sales. The higher, the better.
So they're growing, more profitable, and getting even more efficient. Sounds pretty great so far.
It does, but we need to go deeper. Where's that growth coming from specifically?
All right, let's break it down. Their Aeronautics Systems sector, the one doing those big aircraft programs.
Like the F-35, they saw a 4% sales increase.
Driven by?
More work on the E-2 fleet, mostly.
Ah, the E-2 Hawkeye. The Navy's eye in the sky, right?
That's the one. With all the tension in the world, I bet those are in high demand.
You bet. What else is contributing to that growth?
Well, the Triton and the Global Hawk. Those unmanned aircraft systems.
That's essential for intelligence, surveillance. That kind of thing's only getting more important.
Absolutely. And then you've got defense systems.
What's happening over there?
A little slower growth, 2% increase in sales, but some really cool programs inside that.
Oh, I like cool programs. Give me some details.
Okay, so there's the Sentinel program. Big one.
That's modernizing our ICBMs, right?
Exactly. Intercontinental ballistic missile system. Massive undertaking.
Early stages still, I think.
Yeah, but already bringing in revenue. As they get into full production, watch out.
Building the backbone of America's nuclear deterrent. Kind of scary, but kind of cool.
It is. And then you have something called the Stand and Attack Weapon.
Never heard of it.
It's a new type of cruise missile. Long range, stealthy, designed to get past enemy defenses.
Sounds like something out of a Tom Clancy novel.
Right. Shows you what Northrop Grumman can do. Those super advanced weapons. The U.S. military needs those.
Let's stay ahead of the game.
Exactly. They also mention good old-fashioned ammunition sales are up, too.
Sometimes the basics are still the best. Makes sense with everything going on in the world.
Makes sense the demand for what Northrop Grumman does is strong.
For sure. Okay, so aeronautics and defense systems are doing well. What about mission systems?
Mission Systems had a great quarter. Sales up 7%.
What's driving that?
It's their focus on advanced microelectronics and marine systems. Those investments are paying off. It's kind of cool how these less flashy areas are doing so well.
Yeah, what do you mean?
Well, advanced microelectronics marine systems, they're not as exciting as, say, a new fighter jet.
True.
But they're crucial. Microelectronics, that's the brains behind so much of their tech.
And you need serious expertise in marine systems for, well, modern naval warfare.
Exactly. Quietly powering some of the most sophisticated stuff out there.
The unsung heroes. All right, last sector we got to talk about. Space Systems.
Yeah, that one's a bit different. 3% decrease in sales there.
We talked about those program wind downs earlier,
Yeah.
right? Expected.
Right, that was planned. But even with that, they're seeing good growth from the Space Development Agency.
Those satellite programs. I feel like space is going to be huge for them.
No doubt. Space is becoming, what's the word, Doc, contested.
Like everybody wants a piece of it.
Exactly. And Northrop Grumman's in a good spot to be the leader. Satellites, missile defense, the whole package.
Okay, earlier you said these financials are like a scorecard. But there's got to be more to it than just the numbers.
Of course. These documents also tell us about the risks, the challenges, like they mention macroeconomic pressures.
That's a fancy way of saying.
Inflation, supply chain problems, can't find enough skilled workers, all that fun stuff.
Yeah, every company's dealing with that these days.
True, but it hits a company like Northrop Grumman harder.
Because they need such specialized people, right?
Yeah, and their supply chains are super complex, long lead times on materials, components, all that gets messed up.
It all adds up.
And those things can cut into their profits if they're not careful.
And then there's the big one, government funding. Always a question mark.
Right, that's always the risk with government contracts. Priorities can shift, budgets get cut. Sometimes programs just get delayed or even
Canceled.
Yep. It's like a constant game of budget Tetris, trying to make it all fit.
And on top of that, you've got all the global uncertainty, wars, conflicts, who knows what's next.
That's the wild card. On the one hand, it drives demand for their products.
They're needed more than ever. But on the other hand,
Things get complicated, operations are harder, supply chains get disrupted, even security risks go up.
it's a tough balancing act, I bet.
It is. Got to seize the opportunities, but without taking on too much risk. How well they do that determines their long-term success.
High stakes.
Uh-huh.
All right, so we've got the financials, the sectors, the risks.
Yeah.
What else is there?
We got to talk about accounting changes. Boring, I know, but important.
Okay, hit me with it.
Specifically, there's a new rule for R&D expenses, how they're treated on the books.
R&D, that's research and development. What changed?
Well, because of a tax law back in 2017, now companies have to spread out those expenses over 5 years
Of what?
instead of deducting them all at once.
So it changes how much they pay in taxes, right?
Exactly. Affects their cash flow and reported earnings. Big time. Instead of a big deduction up front, it's spread out.
Delayed gratification on the tax benefits.
You got it. And they actually said in the 10Q how much this impacted them.
Give you the numbers.
2023, their cash flow is down about $500 million just from estimated tax payments related to this change.
Ouch.
And they expect another $350 million hit in 2024.
That's real money. Shows you how much these little accounting tweaks can matter.
They really do. Sometimes it's not just about revenue and profit. Got to look at cash flow, too.
Lifeblood of any business, right?
Yep. And anything that messes with that, whether it's accounting rules or tax laws, you got to pay attention.
All right, so we've covered a ton. Financials, segments, risks, accounting. Starting to feel like we really get what's going on with Northrop Grumman.
We're getting there, but there's a key element we haven't talked about yet.
Oh. Lay it on me.
The human element. The people.
Right, it's easy to get lost in the numbers.
Northrop Grumman talks a lot about their workforce, how they treat their employees, diversity and inclusion, building a culture of innovation.
That's all super important, especially in a field like this.
Totally. Attracting top talent, keeping them happy. In aerospace and defense, you need the best minds. That's what drives success.
They also mentioned their digital transformation efforts.
Ah, yes. Everyone's talking about that these days.
But what does it actually mean for a company like Northrop Grumman?
For them, it's about using technology to get better at everything. Engineering, manufacturing, the supply chain, even customer service.
So it's not just about the cool gadgets, it's how they run the whole show.
Exactly, top to bottom.
Which helps them keep up with how fast technology is changing.
Absolutely. If you're not changing, you're falling behind.
All right, so we've done a real deep dive on Northrop Grumman. Financials, segments, risks, the people, all of it. What's the big takeaway for you?
I think it's clear Northrop Grumman's on the cutting edge, taking advantage of the global demand, but they gotta face those challenges too.
A company in motion, adapting, balancing opportunities and risks.
Yeah.
Shaping the future of defense, really.
And now you've got the knowledge to follow along. See what they do next.
For sure. Last question. What are you most curious about looking ahead? What should we be watching for with Northrop Grumman?
For me, the big one is those new technologies. Hypersonic missiles, space-based defenses. How will Northrop Grumman adapt?
Those are going to change everything.
Exactly. They're going to have to push even harder to stay on top. That's what I'm watching for. At the forefront of this whole new world of defense, we got to talk about some of those specific programs, though, like the Glide Phase Interceptor.
The GPI.
What makes that so groundbreaking?
It all comes down to hypersonic missiles. That's the threat it's designed to counter, and that's a big deal.
Because those things are so fast.
At least 5 times the speed of sound, and incredibly hard to intercept.
Like hitting a bullet with another bullet, but way faster.
Exactly. So the fact that Northrop Grumman won this contract...
This is a lot. Shows their tech is top-notch. They're basically developing the solution to one of the biggest challenges for the U.S. military right now.
Makes you think there's so much going on we never hear about.
Behind the scenes, yeah. All this incredible work to deal with the threats we do hear about in the news.
Speaking of which, the B-21 program. Been seeing some headlines about that one. Cost overruns, delays, that kind of thing.
Right. They talked about it in the 10Q. Had to take a loss over $1.5 billion on the B-21's LRIP options back in Q4 2023.
LRIP, for those of us who don't speak acronym.
Low-rate initial production. It's that phase where they build a few, test them out, make sure the design's good.
Gotcha. So those cost overruns, they triggered something called a Nunn-McCurdy breach review.
Yeah, that happens when costs go way over budget. The Pentagon has to step in, basically.
Make sure it's still worth it.
Exactly. See if they should keep funding the program. In the case of the B-21, they did decide to keep going, but
with some changes.
Right. They restructured the program, especially the command and launch stuff. Seems like that's what was driving the costs up.
So rough patch, but still important. This is the Air Force's next big bomber, right?
Yep. Going to replace the old B-2s eventually. The B-21's supposed to be even stealthier, longer range, the whole 9 yards.
Shows that even with cutting-edge stuff, there are bumps in the road.
Happens all the time. Pushing the limits, sometimes you got to take risks, learn from what goes wrong.
Part of the process. Brings us back to Northrop Grumman's strategy overall, though. They're clearly willing to make those big investments.
Even if it gets messy sometimes, it's a long-term view. They're not just thinking about the next quarter's earnings report.
Thinking about the future of national security, that's a heavy responsibility.
It is. That's why Northrop Grumman's so interesting. They're not just reacting to the world, they're trying to shape it.
I gotta say, this deep dive has been eye-opening. Who knew financial statements could be this interesting?
Right. You start digging in, all these numbers tell a story. And in this case, it's the story of a company at the forefront of everything.
Sometimes those details are way more interesting than the headlines.
Totally. Behind all the balance sheets, there are real people doing amazing things.
Pushing the limits of what's possible, building the tech that's going to shape the future.
Well said. All right, that's our deep dive on Northrop Grumman. Thanks for being with us. We'll be back soon to explore another company on the cutting edge.